Welcome to Interviewer Bootcamp. My name is Carol Quinn. I'm the leading expert on interviewing and hiring, and I am passionate about teaching you how to hire the best. Let's take a look at how we're doing at hiring and look at some statistics. Career Builder did a survey and found that 68% of employers surveyed had a problem with bad hires. According to these employers, the top 5 characteristics of a bad hire were as follows: poor quality work, didn't work well with others, had a negative attitude, received customer complaints, and failed to meet deadlines. Let that sink in for a moment. Those are like a big deal. If interviewers should be doing anything, they should be screening those people out. But they're not doing it, or at least not consistently. Let's take a look at why. Well, one of the reasons companies allow untrained interviewers to select employees. Research found that 80% of those involved in making hiring decisions any formal training on how to select the best. The remaining 20% or so that had received some training, they had received training on interviewing basics, some legal do's and don'ts, and even behavior-based interviewing, none of which will help the interviewer to correctly identify high performers. Let's look at the metrics. Most companies, if they track anything, they track time to fill and cost per hire, which suggests that a fast, cheap hire is what's most important to them. They don't track quality of hire or a cost per bad hire. And that's important because if there was a line item on a P&L that had a dollar amount for the cost of a bad hire and somebody was responsible for that dollar amount and it was deducted from the profits, which cost of a bad hire is, then we'd pay more attention to it and do more about it. But nobody's responsible or accountable. Harvard Business School did some research and found that attitude accounted for 93% of business success, while skill, IQ, and knowledge combined only added up to a 7% contribution. Yet many companies still make their hiring decision based solely on an applicant's level of skill and ignore attitude. All of these things add up to suggest that we're not doing as well as we could be doing at hiring. So what I'm going to focus on today's topic, so Interviewer Bootcamp, listen up. We're going to cover with the time allowed the following: work history, how to get to the real reason an applicant left a job. We're going to zoom in on the real weaknesses of an applicant because you have the right to know and the applicant's going to try to keep you from getting to that information. Third, we're going to talk about how to get your applicant's guard down and getting them talking more freely and openly to you so you get a better quality of applicant information. And we're going to talk about behavior-based interviewing and why you need to stop using it, specifically why it doesn't work very well. Let's start with work history. How to get the real reason the applicant left a job. First, you need to know that the first answer that they provide you is what I call a courtesy answer. Oftentimes it's just not true, but it sounds good in an interview. What they often say is, I left the job for more money, more advancement, for a better opportunity, and then they hope you accept that answer and just move on from it. Well, if there's some ways to find out if it's a courtesy answer or not. Let's start out by looking at work history dates. I love or prefer to have an applicant complete an application form at the time I'm doing an in-person interview rather than interviewing off their resume. And I do this for several reasons. And one of the point that applies here is an application typically has month and year for dates of employment, where a lot of resumes have only year to year. For example, somebody may say they left a job in 2009 and started their next job in 2010, and it looks like consecutive employment. However, if they left the job in January of 2009 and didn't start their new job till November 2010, you have almost a 2-year gap that you're missing. But when you look at month and year, you can see if there is consecutive employment, which brings me to what I call the job change trigger questions. The first one being is, did you have your next job waiting before you left? Well, let me tell you, if there's a gap in employment, just about always the answer is no, which means they left abruptly. Whether they quit or fired, that's going to be staring at you when you look at these month to year dates of employment. So you ask if they had another job waiting, and they'll either say yes, which means they spent some time job hunting in the weeks and months prior, or no, they didn't, which tells you you need to find what brought them to that point to quit. I mean, that's a big deal to no longer have a paycheck, or maybe they got fired. Either way, you want to find out when they made up their mind that they wanted to leave. And even for the person who went job hunting weeks and months prior, something got them to the point where they were ready to get their resume up to date and their suits and clothing and everything ready to start the dreaded interview process. So here I like to look for and dig for specifics like what month, what day, where were you, and what happened. I want to know exactly where they were when they had that, let's call it an aha moment, to make up their mind to leave. And then I want to find the event that triggered that. What was it? What was going on? What happened? Who was involved? Was it a boss? I want to know. Now, it'll tell us a lot of information on why they left a job, and it'll get us to that real reason that they're not prepared with canned answers. So they'll pretty much go down this path answering the questions where you can get to this information. And here's why it's important. Excuse me. The reason they left jobs in the past, if that same reason exists in your working environment, they will leave you. So they could be turnover waiting to happen if you hire them and the same reasons exist. You also get to find out if they're covering up terminations, which, somebody being terminated isn't necessarily bad in all cases, but I want to know about it, and I'm particularly uncomfortable if they're trying to cover it up. Okay. Weaknesses. How to get to the real weakness information, because yes, you, the interviewer, have the right to know. What is the one question that all applicants, if there's just one question that they're prepared to answer? Well, it's the weakness question. And how are they preparing to do it? Well, all the books and articles teach applicants to become interview savvy, and they tell them to answer this question by either say something that has nothing to do with the job, or say something that you've turned around and developed, and it's now a strength. And so why does this not work? Well, if you look at it, first of all, it's fluff, it's meaningless. You might as well not waste your breath. It's not real information. But it doesn't work specifically because you have asked for their opinion. What is your opinion of your weakness? So to fix this question, let me talk to you about what you can do instead to get good quality weakness information. First, you get it out of their opinion by doing this. Ask them, on your last performance evaluation, what were your 3 strengths? Always ask for strengths first, and there's a reason for this. And always ask for performance evaluation, because It gets it out of their opinion. If you had somebody who had never had a performance evaluation or they weren't there long enough, you just ask them, if we were to call your boss, what would he or she say? It's not that you're going to do this, but because it's checkable, and because it's typically, piece of paper, the performance evaluation, people have the tendency, job applicants have the tendency to be more honest because it is checkable. So first you ask for 3 strengths, and then you ask for 2 weaknesses. And 2 because you're downplaying it and nobody likes to talk about their weaknesses. You ask for strengths first because it causes people to avoid this, what we call selective memory. If you were to say, hey, on your last performance evaluation, tell me about your weaknesses, they would say, gosh, I can't remember. But if you say, hey, on that last performance evaluation, tell me about the 3 areas you were rated the strongest, well, hey, those are strengths, bragging rights. They will have no problem remembering that. So when you ask the second part of that question, their weaknesses, they can't all of a sudden say, well, I remember my strengths, but now I can't remember this performance evaluation. They have a tendency to remember. However, if you have somebody who wants to play that selective memory card, gosh, just can't remember. Here's what you do. It's a powerful interviewing technique for interviewers. What you do is you get out your tennis racket, which is right down by your chair, right down by your desk. They didn't see it. They didn't really know. And what you do is you volley it back to them when you get this, I can't remember, this avoidance of answering the weakness question. So you say to them, all right, take a moment and think about it. That's the volley back to them. Take a moment and think about it. What you cannot do next is speak. You have to remain absolutely silent here, and I guarantee you will get an answer. Do you know how long 15 seconds of silence feels like to a job seeker? They will come up with an answer. The problem I see is interviewers like to take applicants off the hook and go, oh, I don't want you to squirm. I'll come back to it. And they never do. You have a right to get this information, so hold out for it. Okay? What the weaknesses tell you? Well, first of all, they tell you what the applicant isn't good at. And if you need them to hit the ground running when you hire them, you need to make sure they have those skills, or you have the means, mode, and opportunity to train them. So it's very important information. Next, this information will tell you what they're least motivated to do. And this is important because weaknesses correspond with what somebody likes doing the least. What we like doing the least, we tend to not put as much effort into, we procrastinate. It will tell you what they are not highly self-motivated to do. Even if they develop the skill, it's not going to be one of those highly motivating tasks for them. And that's important information when we talk about hiring self-motivated people who are passionate, people with a can-do attitude. These are the people we call the high performers. Okay, so weaknesses tell you about their skill gaps and tells you about what they don't like to do. Important information. All right, next, getting their guard down and how to get your applicant to talk to you more freely. First, step 1, what you do is you do things to befriend them and make them feel comfortable. How do you do that? Well, small chit-chat is really good. Don't jump right into the interview. Don't ask them to tell me about yourself type questions. Small chit-chat would be maybe directions. Did you have any trouble finding this place? Weather. Non-controversial things. You don't want to talk about religion or politics, and you may not even want to talk about sports teams, but it's okay. If you're in a town with a football team or baseball team and they played the night before or over the weekend, you might want to talk about the game to see, small chit chat. But you can offer them a beverage. I recommend that you put your phone on Do Not Disturb. Make them important. Smile. You can also talk to them about the interview process itself, what to expect. Like, I'm going to ask you a set of questions. If it sounds like I'm reading them, I am, because I ask all applicants the same set of questions so we can be fair. If you have questions for me, which I'm sure you do, I'd like you to hold them to the end of the interview process, and I'll tell you more about the job and answer your questions then. And I'll also tell you about next steps and expectations about the process. Things like that you can do in this relax the applicant stage. Here is the one thing I'll tell you about body language, because I am not a big body language reader person in the interview process, because people can put on a suit and look great and do a firm handshake and it tells you absolutely nothing. But just about everybody, no matter how comfortable or how nervous they come to the interview and go through the interview process, they're the most nervous probably in the first 5 to 10 minutes. They don't know you, they don't know the surroundings, and they're starting to settle in. So you will notice their body language is going to be a little bit more stiff in the beginning, and in 5 to 10 person, they're going to start to settle into that chair they're sitting in. Their shoulders will drop a little bit. They'll lean back. They'll just settle in. That settling in process is what I'd like you to start to pay attention to. And that is your sign where you can start the interview process. And just realize you're not doing this for them, even though it's a good thing to do for them. You're doing it for you, because relaxed applicants tell you more information. And I have had applicants who have told me things that absolutely surprised me, that changed the game, meaning I was interested in them prior to what they said, and then I ruled them out. So you want to get this information. And so this getting the guard down and holding off to the meat of the interview is something you do to get your applicant comfortable so you get the best quality of information. Once you do that, it's very important that you keep their guard down. And just because you get it down doesn't mean it stays down. In fact, contrary. While the interview process is a judging process, let's face it, okay? And what I want you to do is, I'm not saying don't judge them, because if you don't hire them, you're kind of judging them negatively. And if you do hire them, you're judging them positively. What I want to tell you is, I don't want you to show any negative judgment. And this is a little easier said than it is done, because while you're writing your notes down and looking at the next question to ask, and if there's some silent time there, the applicant has nothing better to do than to sit in that chair and read your body language and listen to your tone and how it may change. And you may not be aware that you were smiling and happy with one of their answers, and then your tone became very neutral, or worse, for their next response. They pick up on things. If you've ever had an applicant change or amend anything they've said during the interview process, they do that for one reason and one reason only. It's because they picked up from you that their answer wasn't great, and now they're trying to make it a better answer. When that happens, that doesn't help you as an interviewer. You get confusing information. So to keep their guard, to not show any negative judgment and keep the guard down, no matter what they say during the interview process, I just want you to have a big smile and approval and a positive nod. Again, that maintains their self-worth, and continue on in the interview process. That smile and nod. This makes an applicant feel so good, because even if they don't get the job, they want to feel like they were befriended and understood, and they want to have a good interview process where they weren't negatively judged. And let's face it, many of your job applicants are also your business's customers. So you want them, even if they don't get the job, to walk away still feeling good about the interview process. So maintain their integrity, but again, you're not doing this for them. You're really doing it for you, because you want to make the best hiring decision, and you're going to use the information that you gather from them to base your decision on, which makes information gathering a critical part of the process here. Okay, let's talk about behavior-based interviewing and why it's the reason, yes, behind many bad hires. If you understand the interview process and know where it's gone in the last 30 years, we didn't start out with behavior-based interviewing. We actually started out just with your gut feeling, and God, 100 years ago I went through training on hiring based on your gut. And then we evolved to open-ended questions, which simply weren't yes-no questions. They were questions that got the applicant talking a little bit more. And then we moved to hypothetical questions, which hypothetical questions produce hypothetical answers, which tells you nothing about behavior. And then about 25 years ago, behavior-based interviewing was introduced. And considering where we had come from, we thought it was going to be great. But we've had a chance to use it now for a couple of decades, and we still have some really bad hit and miss hiring results. So it's not as good as you think it is for several reasons. First of all, there are bunches and bunches of bad behavior-based interview questions. And let me tell you, they could cause an applicant to spin overly positive information about themselves back to the interviewer, causing the interviewer to overrate them, rate them higher than they should be rating them because the answer sounds so good. And just so you know, overrated applicants underperform. That's a problem that we have in the workplace. Let me give you an example. Here's a 1 to 5 rating, 5 being the best, and here's a behavior-based interview question that is designed to measure whether the applicant will go above and beyond to satisfy a customer, which is fair when you think about what we want to assess. Will that applicant go above and beyond? I want to hire those people who go above and beyond. But let's look at this. On the 1 to 5 scale, with the 5 being the best, what is the worst possible answer you could get by asking this question? What is the worst possible answer an applicant would give you score-wise, rating-wise on that 1 to 5 scale? Think about it. Could you get a 1 answer? No, you probably couldn't. The worst answer you'll probably get is maybe a 4 or maybe a 3. This question pretty much eliminates the lower half of the ratings. Let me explain why. When you say, tell me about a specific time you went above and beyond, you're going to get applicants who are going to tell you about a time they went above and beyond and exceeded, satisfied a customer. It's a happy ending success story. You can't help but get great answers from everybody. And I guarantee you, even a poor performer has one of these stories in their back pocket. A customer came in happy and they made them even happier. And you can bet that's the story they're going to choose to share with you in the interview process. You ask questions like this, behavior-based question, this is part of the reason we have bad hires. But you can still measure whether somebody goes above and beyond, but you need to make your question a whole lot better. This is a formula. I'm going to fix this question and show you an example based on motivation-based interviewing. Here, let me show it to you. All right, tell me about a specific time when you had to deal with an irate customer. Well, we no longer mention above and beyond, so can we still assess above and beyond? Let's check. Can I get an applicant response where they said, all right, I had an irate customer and I did this much, no more, no less? Yeah, I could get that type of answer. So I could get a 3. Could I get a response where somebody said, I had this irate customer, I did this, 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 and did that? and they can give you the specific details. Yes, you can get those stories with this question, so you could get a 5 answer. Is it possible you could have an applicant tell you about an irate customer that was just impossible to please no matter what they did? It wasn't their fault. It was beyond their control. Yeah, you can get some of those stories with this question as well. So this question gives you that full range of responses, and it can help you assess whether somebody goes above and beyond. And what we've done is we no longer have a bad behavior-based interview question. Let's look at some more of the reasons we have behavior-based interview issues. We assume signs of motivation equal self-motivation. So if somebody demonstrated that they had some drive or initiative or were a self-starter, we assume they were or they are self-motivated. We assume that we've assessed motivation and they are self-motivated. Or maybe we ask questions, hey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you? Or is it important? Or give me an example of a time you were self-motivated. Well, there is no such thing as zero motivation. It doesn't run on a scale of all or nothing. Motivation, and specifically self-motivation, is degrees of, and it pertains to what type of work you're doing. Behavior-based interviewing does not and cannot assess motivation correctly. And we know a motivation is important when it comes to hiring, but using behavior-based interviewing to assess it is an ineffective way. So on one hand, we know it's important to do. On the other hand, if we think we're assessing motivation correctly using behavior-based interviewing, we have this false sense of confidence that we're doing it well when we're really not. Number 3, no hiring standard in behavior-based interviewing. And what I say about that, you could have one interviewer who asks a question, hey, tell me about a time you went above and beyond, love an applicant, and you can have another interviewer who maybe asks even the same questions who doesn't like and refuses to hire that applicant. It's behavior-based interviewing, since it has no hiring standard, no criteria for a high performer, and is mostly just skill-based assessment, it really is nothing more than hiring based on your gut feeling. If the interviewer likes the person, they hire them. If they don't like the person, they don't hire them. This list of 3 could go on to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a lot of reasons out there behavior-based interviewing doesn't work. But I love this quote from Lou Adler, somebody who's an expert in the world of the recruiting world. And he wrote this in Recruiting Intelligence. I suspect they'll come to the same conclusion that behavior-based interviewing doesn't improve quality of hire and in many cases actually causes it to decline. So with that said, let's talk about a way to improve quality of hiring and the direction interviewing is going in. And if you notice this little quote here, excellence is not a skill, but it's an attitude. If you remember that Harvard Business School quote that found success was tied to 93% of attitude, what I'm going to talk to you about is motivation-based interviewing. It is really the evolution of interviewing and hiring. We've kind of figured out what doesn't work with all the ways we've used before, and we've identified the holes and closed them, and what came out of it is this, motivation-based interviewing. It's also called MBI for short. If you're not familiar with it, it's an interviewing method specifically developed for hiring high performers. Let me give you a definition of a high performer. It's somebody who goes above and beyond in the job that they were hired for and does not stop at average. MBI assesses 3 components common to all top performers. The 3 are skill, attitude, and passion. So it goes beyond the behavior-based interviewing skill assessment only and looks at the 3 components common to all high performers. It uses properly and consistently phrased skill assessment questions. Now, mind you, you're going to use your skill assessment questions to gather a second piece of applicant information, and that second piece of information is on their attitude. And to let you know how simple that is, that question on the prior slide that was a bad question, the above and beyond question, the way I fixed it was a MBI question, and that fix will not only assess the skill, it'll assess the applicant's attitude simply based on that fix. Once you learn MBI, you learn about 3 techniques for writing effective questions. You follow those simple techniques with all of your skill assessment questions, and you will get the second piece of information from each of your questions. Attitude is considered the #1 predictor of future performance and success, a lot because it has to do with how a person responds to obstacles and challenges and difficulties, setbacks and failures. Do they respond effectively or ineffectively? And depending on their attitude or their thinking towards these challenges determines how they respond to it. So this is really about, MBI is about the same amount of interviewing time, even though you're getting 3 components, 3 pieces of information that's common to all high performers. You're doing it in just about the same amount of interviewing time. It's just better quality of information that turns out to produce better hiring results. MBI also has a built-in minimum hiring standard that says hire only high performers. This is significant because it basically says if the applicant doesn't have the skill to do the job, the right kind of attitude, and a passion for doing it, don't hire them. And the only exception is on that skill, the only one of these 3 components that can be added or changed after you hire somebody is skill. So let's say you have somebody who's underskilled or even unskilled, an entry-level person. If you can teach them the skill and they have the attitude and passion, that's still fine. These are high potentials that are still great hires. But it's not just enough to say, here's what makes a high performer tick and here's how you hire them. You have to hold out for them. It's a minimum hiring standard. And that's one of the great pieces about motivation-based interviewing. It's also something that interview-savvy applicants, they can't fake it. They can't provide attitude information that belongs to the attitude of the high achiever when they don't have that attitude. It's not something they even comprehend. So it is simple, it's effective. So if you're not familiar with motivation-based interviewing, I highly recommend you look into it and even take the time to look. All right, it's time to wrap it up. Let me talk to you about this book titled Don't Hire Anyone Without Me. It's the How-To Motivation-Based Interviewing book. So if you don't already know about MBI and you're interested, this is probably the book you want to start with. This book is available at your HR Florida Conference bookstore. It's available SHRM online in their bookstore, as well as Amazon, Apple, Barnes & Noble. It's available in print and as an ebook. And you can also get it at www.hireauthority.com. And let me tell you that website is worth going to. It'll tell you a lot more about MBI. Plus, there's some valuable free resources there. Some tutorials, some podcasts, videos, a bunch of information. So there's also a LinkedIn group on motivation-based interviewing that's worth joining. But let me close with my contact information. Feel free to email or call me. And this presentation was available today at hireauthority.com/presentations. Feel free to share it with anybody else you like. Have a wonderful day and happy hiring.